Dr. Nakpangi Thomas.
And this morning we have with us Anthony Adams, who is running for mayor of Detroit, Michigan. And like we say, we want you to tune in every Saturday to Speaking Truth to Power for one reason. So you can actually witness history, and when they write it and it's not right, you can tell your family and your friends, no, I was there, and this is exactly how it happened. And Speaking Truth to Power will do that. And welcome to...
You said Speaking Truth to Power already. And we're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world.
Right. And
Yes.
Anthony.
Yes.
So we know in January you announced that you were running for mayor in the city of Detroit.
I was the first person to announce.
Now there happen to be 10 people running for mayor.
Yes.
Does that also include the mayor himself? Or
Yes,
no?
it does.
Okay, so it's a
9 challengers and then 1 incumbent.
Right. So tell us, why should the people of the city of Detroit vote for you? Because one of the first things they're going to say is, we've seen him. He worked with Kwame. He worked with Coleman. We know what that's like. And a lot of people are going to say, you know what, it's time for change.
Right, and then the other question is, where have you been?
Right.
Right.
Well, they should vote for me because I am the change agent. When you've been in a structure and you understand how an organization exists and how it operates, you also understand how to change that organization. And given the level of experience that I bring to the table and also the level of passion that I have for the people in the city of Detroit, I understand what the issues are. I understand how to address those issues within the structure and the confines of how the organization operates and what the organization needs in order to change its dynamic and trajectory. Because if the city was working in the manner that it needed to work, then we wouldn't have poverty at the levels that we have. We wouldn't have violence at the levels that we have. We wouldn't have black contracting at the levels that we have. We would have something completely different. And so when you talk about you've seen me, yes, I've been around, but I've also been a transformational agent in doing a lot of things in our community. Very active in my church, a Triumph Church, where I'm the head of the social justice ministry. Being out on issues of expungement, being out on issues of housing, being out on issues of homelessness, being out on issues of employment opportunities. These are the types of things that I have been doing in the community without fanfare. Because I think oftentimes people raise their hand and want to be recognized, but I believe that the work needs to be done and that you do the work without fanfare.
Now, I've sort of noticed, I think we all have, the city of Detroit, the makeup is starting to change. We have a lot of people, sort of just like Dr. Thomas, who live here, and even some younger people who've gotten their education and have said, you know what, I want to be part of that revitalization. I remember my grandparents talking about Detroit, how great it was, and actually there are courses now at our universities at Eastern, Michigan, Michigan State, Washtenaw, and Wayne, where they actually teach the history of Detroit, which is a great course. I actually took that course.
Okay.
And you have a lot of those young progressive millennials coming in, and they're looking at you going, you know what, you're not hearing us, you're not reading us.
I don't know why they would. I don't know why they would even. We don't. They're not saying that directly to me.
No, this is their mindset. They're
Right.
like, you know what? We want this city to be back to what it was. We want it to be walkable. We want to be able to walk our kids down the street to schools. We want to come in here and build these homes up, but we want them to stay the same. We want to be able to work here. And they might look at you and be like, how can you understand that? How can you help us? You haven't had that conversation with us. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of millennials and done a lot of different things that I think are pretty creative. For example, I don't think there's any other candidate that has attended a spoken word events and actually participated to understand exactly what our young people are talking about. I also have a lot of young people in my campaign who I'm connected with who are schooling me, I'm going to say, on the issues that are impacting young people, creating young culture, young art community in our city. We have not invested any effort or resources to create and safe spaces for our young people to participate. And so when you talk about how we transform the city and how we transform its culture, part of my approach is how do we use, for example, abandoned schools to create youth space for our young people to thrive and operate. When you talk about schools districts, the city cannot thrive if a school district is not strong. And part of my platform and what I've called for is the creation of a chief education officer, someone who is committed to uplifting the education of all the children in the city of Detroit. When my kids went to DPS back in the good old days, it had 285,000 students, 250 buildings. It was the big dog. Now we have charter schools, which probably educate more children in the city of Detroit than our Detroit public school system. And so how do we begin to have a high level of accountability for our charter schools, which we really don't because of how state law is structured for people not to be on those boards. I'm calling for changes in state law to ensure that the charter schools that operate in the city of Detroit have people who are from the community. You got to have schools. You also have to have transportation. And part of the issue with transportation is about mobility now. We have fixed large assets of buses that move through and through the city, but we need to figure out how do we also move people through cars, through Uber, through Lyft, through those little mobile pairs. There are a lot of different ways that we have to talk about moving people through the city in order to create a mobile society to get people where they need to be.
So are you looking at, I know, like I live in Washington County, and we actually have a Department of Mobility.
Yes.
And there's a Director of Mobility in Washington County. And it makes sure that, the bus lines, like whenever they change a route on a bus line, they announce it. They go into communities and they say, how many people do we have that are handicapped that will need special buses? And now it's to the point where we have smart buses, the smart system.
Right.
You call the number and you say, okay, I need a bus and I need a pickup here.
Right.
And that was all able to be enacted because there's now an official Department of Mobility. Are you talking about something like that for the city of Detroit? And what does that look like? I mean, because you live here, would it be good for you sometimes to say, you know what, I want to go downtown, but I don't want to pay for parking. I think I just want to get the bus. How would that affect you? Because you're here.
Well, for me, I have a vehicle, so I don't necessarily drive the bus, but I know where the area I live, there's several bus stops. For me, I have different routes that I can take to get to downtown, and the bus runs every 15 to 20 minutes on
the main line.
Right.
You obviously live on a main line.
Yeah, so for me,
Right.
it's a little bit different than some of my friends who don't live near a bus line. So for them, it may take 20 to 30, 40 minutes for a bus to come, and then they can't connect to Washtenaw County, for example.
Right.
So there's that gap where with transportation that is missing from one county to the next. We should be able to get to at least our tri-counties.
We should.
For a long time, Oakland County
Has been the block.
Has been the block. Now that the leadership in Oakland County has changed, they have gone back to the table and they're looking at that. Now, I'm not sure, is Wayne County a part of that conversation now? And if not,
Wayne County
if
was
you
actually
are elected, will you become part of that conversation?
Well, Wayne County actually was leading the charge with respect to trying to create what they call a regional transit authority that would allow for all of these entities and modes of transportation to be incorporated. I think part of the issue is that there really isn't an end game in understanding how mobility should look. Is it a whole fixed asset, meaning large buses? Is it paratransit facilities? How do you begin to integrate different models of transportation to create a system to get people to the main line? If you live outside of areas like Woodward, Grand River, Jefferson, Michigan Avenue, those lines run well because they are fixed routes and people know when to expect it. But if you're deeper in the communities, how do I get you to a point where you can actually access transportation? That becomes the issue and the question on how we go about that. And I'm not real optimistic that the regional politics would allow us to create a regional transportation system because you still need a dedicated tax in order for that to operate. And we understand, given the economics of Macomb County, which is a low-tax county, Washtenaw County, for that much, is a low-tax county, versus high-tax counties in Oakland County and Wayne County, that's got to be sorted out. I believe that we need to talk about it, but we also in Detroit need to understand where are our people working. We have the information and data which shows where most people in the city of Detroit actually work outside the city of Detroit. And how do we get them there? And I think there's some smaller things and smaller steps we can take to bring this information together and create a model of mobility to move people from point A to point B. That's a sustainability model, and we've got to begin to be much more aggressive in our conversations about how we're going to help the residents here in the city of Detroit.
Mr. Before you actually go on to another topic, Can you tell our audience a little bit about your actual qualifications? We know that you worked during the Coleman A. Young Seniors Administration. You worked during the Kwame Kilpatrick's administration. But what are your actual qualifications for mayor?
Well, let me start with my undergraduate degree. Actually, it's in urban management, urban planning. I always wanted to be what they call a professional city manager, someone who really understands how cities operate. And so I studied extensively operation of governments. I also did a stint as a fellow, actually, in Washington, D.C. government, where I worked with the Councilwoman Nadine P. Winter when I was in D.C. In my undergraduate ages. After that, I went to Georgetown Law School, where I had extensive experience in working with various governmental agencies. Worked in the Department of Justice Tax Division. Worked for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, as it was called right back then. Worked at the Securities Exchange Administration, Securities Exchange Commission, Investment Management Division. Also worked at 2 large private firms in D.C. When I left D.C. and came to Michigan, I was a law clerk to Honorable Anna Diggs Taylor. She was the first black federal district court judge in the Eastern District of Michigan. I actually was the first black law clerk that she had hired and the first male that she hired. And so I have a history of working with women in powerful positions, being raised by a single mother who believed that women need to be respected and uplifted. After I finished my clerkship with Anna Diggs Taylor, I then was an associate at a private law firm. It was called Hill Lewis, then it's called Clark Hill now. I was a litigation associate where I specialized in commercial transactions and litigated quite a few cases. After I left the law firm, I then joined Coleman Young's administration, where I was an executive assistant in economic development. And so when you talk about the initial Chrysler-Jefferson plant expansion, when you talk about the People Mover project, when you talk about the Victoria Park subdivision, first single-family housing subdivision built in Detroit in more than 60 years since the Eisenhower administration, restoring commercial airline service back to City Airport with Southwest Airlines. There are a number of projects. There really isn't one major project, economic development project, that haven't worked on in the city of Detroit in its history. So I understand where this city has been and where it needs to go. After I left Coleman's administration, I then went and joined Dyke Magassett. I was of council where I worked in economic development, working on a lot of affordable housing projects all across the city. Worked on a lot of commercial projects. In fact, I was the attorney who cited most of the Home Depots before they even came to Michigan. I was the attorney who did most of the zoning and things of that nature. So I have that level of experience. I then started my own firm with 3 other lawyers that we grew from 4 lawyers to 14 lawyers to 28 support staff. I was the managing partner with that firm where I specialize in, again, affordable housing. That is a forte and a skill set that I have because I believe that people need to be in safe and sanitary housing. I did a lot of public housing consulting. In fact, was the lead consultant on the Jeffries redevelopment, Herman Gardens redevelopment. Every public housing project that has gone and changed and transformed, I was involved as a lead partner or person in those projects. So I understand public housing and what it means to people who are at risk. After I left my consulting and my law firm, I then became general counsel for the Detroit Public Schools, where I was in charge not only of the legal department, where I grew that legal staff. It was a small in-house staff. I grew it to a large in-house staff, and also supervised the administration of the district's federal title money, where you talk about how you advocate for homeless people, talk about how you advocate for people with disabilities. There isn't too much I haven't done.
I can hear that.
All right, and I'm not even finished yet, but I'm not here to talk about all those things because that's part of the record of what I do. And when people ask me about my experience, I tell them I'm probably one of the more experienced people who's ever run for government or who ever run for office because I have been in different aspects, in part from being a parent of children who attended DPS schools, a parent who participated in PAL programs, a parent whose son played hockey at Kronk Arena, all these, a guy who hung out at Baker's Keyboard Lounge. There isn't too much in this city that I haven't done.
Right.
And so I have the experience.
There are some things I'm curious about. Now, back here in March, the federal government passed a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, which a lot of it went to the states. and now we are looking at, I want to say, $15 trillion infrastructure.
Right.
Infrastructure is not just, I mean, it does consist of bringing free
Freeways.
free Wi-Fi to areas, because we found out during COVID
Right.
there was a there was a severe lack of that for children who had to attend school. I mean, kids were going, parents were taking them, sitting in McDonald's parking lots
Right.
just to get Wi-Fi. And we know Wayne County is one of the largest counties in the state, and it happens to have some of the most underserved population
The most
right
underserved.
now. And so I'm curious, because the COVID bill is like 5,400 and some odd pages. And it does tackle a lot of things. It tackles access to school, tackles access to the internet, access for children with disabilities and people with disabilities. And right now we have to do a station identification. I will finish my question.
You are watching Speaking Truth to Power live on WJZZ, streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And we are back on Speaking Truth to Power with Denise Kirchoff and Dr. Nakpangi Thomas, and our very special guest, mayoral candidate Anthony Adams.
And now,
Okay.
and some of the communities, the teachers, like in our community, for
Right.
example, we've already seen what the COVID relief bill is going to look like, and how it's going to affect our children, and how that money should be spent. So we're prepping for meetings, and everybody out there that's running for office is also taking a look at that.
Yes.
And also the new infrastructure bill. Parts of it has passed, parts of it are not. And once again, people are in different communities, because I have friends in Macomb County that are running for office and that are in office, and they're already taking a look at what that infrastructure looks like. And my understanding is from some of those people that they're already having those conversations about, okay, tri-county transportation. So how far are you on that? Have you attended those meetings? Have you sat down with DPS and said, look, I understand the COVID relief bill. The governor has given you the guidelines. Since I'm running for mayor, let's have that conversation. I need this information. And also to the Transit Authority, who's also looking at the infrastructure bill. Have you gone to the table or sat your people to the table and said, look, you know what, I want to be part of this conversation, whether I'm elected or not. This is my community. I want to be a part of that conversation. And if you are, what does that conversation look like to you?
Well, I think part of the issue, at least with respect to DPS, which got close to $950 million, almost $1 billion, is that there was no level of communication between the city and the school district relative to how to spend what I would say $1.8 billion in creating a new infrastructure system here in the city of Detroit. They are not allowing us to come to the table to participate in these kinds of discussions because we are not elected. It's pretty much confined to the people who are elected. What I have been able to do is attend some of the public meetings. The DPS, quite frankly, has not had any public meetings, to my knowledge, to discuss how they're actually going to spend their money.
Just a side note, they are legally required to do that
They
under
have,
the Open Meetings Act.
they have,
Especially when they're, you and I know this, we all know this. You are taking public funds, and according to the governor, you have to have open meetings on how, even if you don't allow people to speak, you have to have open meetings on how that money is going to be spent.
they haven't had any. And so when you don't have meetings, you can't participate. But I have participated in some of the public meetings that the actual city had when they set their priorities on how their
Right.
money was going to be spent. I am not happy with the direction, quite frankly, because I felt there's been more of a decree from up top as to how the money should be spent versus really listening to the community on where the dollars need to be spent. When you talk about, for example, the digital divide, where we recognized very early in the process when COVID hit that our children were going to be hampered and hamstrung because they didn't have access to digital devices, nor did they have access to the internet. And so part of what we did, being very progressive in our churches, we distributed more than 10,000 digital devices before the city and the school district recognized that we actually had a problem. I don't know how you can live in the city of Detroit and not understand that the people here, there's you can look at Comcast's user patterns to determine the absence of digital access in the city of Detroit. And so I think they dropped the ball on that.
You know, I'm going to say, I don't think they were unaware because they know the needs of their students and they know which students are lacking. So I don't think there was necessarily that they were unaware. I think they were just ill prepared
I'm,
for.
I'm gonna push back on you on that because COVID hit in March, when things got shut down. They didn't really start figuring out that they needed to do something almost until January. Well, that's a 7 to 8 month period where our children literally were left to their own devices, and the absence of learning in the community where people need to be highly educated, I think is very disturbing to me. And so I'm not going to give them a pass on that. They had digital.
Oh, I'm not giving them a pass. I'm saying that they knew that their students didn't have access, but they were not proactive in preparing themselves.
I think we're saying the same
yeah,
thing.
we are. We are saying the
both
same
know.
thing. That's why I'm saying.
I also have to throw this in here. We had the same issue in Washington County because people seem to think Washington County is the University of Michigan,
Right.
which is supposed to be one of the greatest universities in the world. Go State, my daughter's going there. Go Blue too.
You're biased.
And, of course. But here's the reality. We had pockets literally within the city of Ypsilanti Township in Augusta, where kids could not get online, where teachers did not have access.
You have that gap here too.
Right. We actually
especially
had
downtown.
We had Rep. Robbie, who lives in a very nice area in Ann Arbor, not able to restream because of the area he lives in, and he's a sitting rep.
Right.
And literally lives not too far from me, and he's not able to get internet. So we were trying it, and he had to call in. And he's a representative in the state of Michigan. So that's what this digital divide looks like. And people think, well, it's in the more affluent areas. Oh, no, it's mostly in downtown. And sort of the same way in Washington County. We have pockets. Like, you can be part of one neighborhood. It's great. The other, and everybody knows this because you drive down the street and you see these huge satellite dishes. All right, and then and you see kids outside going, yeah, no, we didn't see that on TV. I mean, because we've integrated internet into our schools, and that the schools aren't teaching online even when we didn't have COVID because the majority of the kids don't have it. So I think this is more of a statewide thing, and I don't understand why our governor hasn't just said, look, our state is going to have a form of free limited Wi-Fi, at least for educational purposes.
I like that.
So this is a top, this is a top-up thing.
Yeah.
This doesn't start at the bottom with us because we know. Because, I lived in a house in Washington County. I literally had to walk to my front lawn and stand outside the stone can you hear me?
Right.
Well, if you all want to join this conversation, give us a call at 313-355-6018. Again, our phone lines are open. You can call in at 313-355-6018. And I actually said the phone number correct this time.
And I do feel, if and when you become mayor, this is a conversation. You need to be knocking on the governor's door.
We're going to be past
conversation.
We're going to be past conversation. Right. We don't have time to be wasting.
Tell us, this is what we're doing. You need to get on board with this right now.
What you say, the train is already moving?
Come on, I got your pass.
But you got to have a vision.
We've got to have this conversation.
But if you don't have a vision for what the city should look like or what the state should look like, that's where you have these, I call them gaps in the deficit of understanding. Them that vision. Which is when we talk about having a city that works for everyone. You have to, we have a tremendous infrastructure in our city. We have police buildings, we have school buildings, we have other city facilities, we have public lighting poles which stretch throughout the entire city. There is no way that we shouldn't have access to universal internet in the city of Detroit, but for the profit motive of the companies that provide this service for a fee, being a block and an obstacle to that. So when you're talking about transforming the city and being progressive, these are the kind of ideas that I have been talking about. How do you put that in place? How do you develop the system in order to provide our young people for what they need? Because with this COVID and now Delta variant strain, we're going to be locked in this for quite some time. We need to just buckle down, understand that, and provide our young people and our old people and ourselves with what we need.
Yes, hi, caller. Thank you for calling Speaking Truth to Power. You have a question or a comment?
Both, actually. I wanted to say great show, as always. And that topic about free internet distribution statewide, I think that's a show you should do just about that. And maybe overall education. But a question for Mr. Adams is, um, all your credentials and experience and everything sound good, but how do you sidestep the dark shadow of the association with the Kilpatrick administration, which you were a part of?
Well, I think that shadow was only in the minds of people who wanted to be a shadow. When you look at what transpired under the Kilpatrick administration, what you'll see is that I was never implicated or involved in anything that was inappropriate. In fact, my integrity during that whole process remained intact. I never testified at a trial for Kwame Kilpatrick, never was called before City Council to testify about anything for that. And so they talk about the shadow of me. Let's talk about the shadow of what's going on in City Hall now, where the levels of corruption, the levels of favoritism, they want to hang Kilpatrick on me, and Kilpatrick was his own man. I'm my own man. I stand on my own merit, and I think we need to be much more concerned about what's going on now versus trying to show shade on a brother who all he did was work a job and work hard for the people who live in the city of Detroit.
All right. I appreciate your answer and your candor. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you, caller. I think I understand what the caller's saying, and it's unfortunate that you can be involved with someone who's, whether you think they've done something wrong or not. The government has said you've done something wrong and you must be punished. And, it's like it's not your dirt, but of course people think, well, you were standing there. You know what I'm saying?
It took the federal government, they spent more than $60 million to investigate Kwame Kilpatrick. Now, I'm working a job every day, working 18 hours a day, working hard for the people in the city of Detroit. I wasn't hired to be a criminal investigator. I was hired to be the deputy mayor and to run the city during a time when it faced very difficult challenges, very difficult budget issues, where the conversation was about the city was going to go broke, the city was going to go bankrupt. Well, the reality is that the city didn't go bankrupt, that the city was able to hold on to its assets, that we were able to fight suburban takeover of the water system, and that we were able to right-size our finances so that we could move the city forward. So when they talk about what I did in that administration, they need to focus their attention on all the positive things that I did and not try to, it's this guilt by association thing, which they all like to play into, and which is part of the mindset of what people have to deal with in the city of Detroit, because they're disappointed at black leadership, which led to the election of a white mayor who has a lot of the same traits and characteristics that they want to blame Kwame Kilpatrick for the rest of his life.
Now, let me ask you a question. Can you break down Proposal P and what that actually is?
Yeah, so Proposal P was a charter revision, annual charter revision that comes about, I think, every 10 years, where the people voted for a charter commission. And what happened politically is that the mayor attempted to run his own charter commissioners to control the process. He was unsuccessful, and so an independent charter commission was elected. They had some initial growing pains, as you will do in any new entity or people coming together, but at the end of the day, they were able to develop a charter which talks about how do we have an affordable water policy, how do we have an affordable housing policy, how do we protect immigrant rights in the city of Detroit, how do we deal with issues of transparency in government. A big part of Proposal P is a backlash to the secret style of government that's been operating in the city of Detroit for the last 8 years. And so you had a legitimately elected charter commission which forwarded their proposed charter to the governor, who rejected for political reasons. The Attorney General pointed out some legal issues with that charter. Those issues were corrected, and now the question is, why are we not putting this on the ballot? Why are they spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight putting a charter proposal on the ballot when we have people's basements are flooding throughout this entire city and lack of attention to infrastructure? So the charter is a move to create a lot of different things that people believe that we need because of a lack of transparency in government and how it operates.
Okay. Now, one of the things I'm curious about, because I do remember some of the things that were struck out of the charter, because my understanding, and I might be wrong on this, of the things that were struck down were things that a city cannot do. It has to happen at a different level, which is a state or a federal level. So would you call that a point of overreach? I mean, I understand wanting to do them, but then you also look at Wayne County, who, because we've had Republican governors for a very long time, have just overlooked the city of Detroit, who's the only time they've looked at it is when it's come to sports and arenas and revenue. but
Right.
they've overlooked the outlying areas where people live. And I can understand that frustration because I'd want that in a charter too. And was it more of a fact that some of the things that were talked about in the charter cannot happen on
No,
a
that's
city level?
that's propaganda. That's the talking points of the opposition. They talked about, for example, that people were going to lose their pensions. That's absolutely false. There are so many
No, I was
false.
talking about more of the things that they said.
But
you
I had the
can't be
first
done.
I had the first breakthrough to propaganda because there is a propaganda machine where they're spending millions of dollars in TV commercials with propped up people that they're putting out front to talk about how the charter is going to harm people. They talk about pensions. There's nothing in this charter which even impacts pensions. That's an absolute lie. And so when I hear these things, I have to first deal with the propaganda, but also deal with the practical effect of what they're talking about. It is not an overreach for the city in its own charter to provide protection for immigrant rights. There is no disconnect or incongruency between what the city can do in this charter with respect to immigrant rights and what the federal government can do. We can always have more rights for people in our city.
We have them in Washington County.
And we talk about that. You talk about the water affordability. There is nothing inappropriate in the charter that allows for us not to have an affordable water policy, a water policy based on people's ability to pay. How do you do that? This mechanically set up in the charter, and there was not a financial impact on that because they never conducted any financial analysis. They simply put a document out which says it's going to cost the city $2 billion. And because we have such a biased media in this city, which runs with everything that the administration says, part of the problem is that we got to cut through.
Oh, we actually have another call. Yes,
Okay.
caller, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, just got I guess, sort of a general question, I think. I was wondering, what do you think is the single, let's say, single biggest issue that you're going to try and champion that is going to help the people of Detroit in the most, I guess, concrete way?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing we have to do is we have to stabilize people in their housing. When you look at the impact of $600 million in overtaxation and then more than 100,000 people that actually lost their homes, the absence of programs that are designed to help people who live in the city of Detroit, the special financing programs that are available for people who want to move in the city, but those same neighborhoods, they have no program to help people who actually live in the city of Detroit. And so what I've got to do first and foremost, I have to stabilize people in their homes. I have to make money and dollars available so that people can get their roofs fixed, so people can get their furnace fixed, so people can get the siding and the painting to fix their front patio. I've walked through more than 5,000 houses in the city of Detroit. I got a pretty good sense of what needs to happen. We also need to stop the process of referring houses to tax foreclosure to the Wayne County Treasurer. That is an administrative act that can be taken by the mayor to stop putting houses in the foreclosure process. These are simple things that can be done. We also have to begin to address the issue of crime in our community. Rampant gun violence, the lack of hope and helplessness that exists in our city has to be addressed. How do we do that? We've got to be much more intentional and interventionally focused on outreach efforts to young men and young women who are at risk. And I'm not talking about this little lip service.
1 second. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Speaking Truth to Power, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top media social platforms. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And you are back here with Speaking Truth to Power with Denise Kirchoff, Dr. Nakpangi Thomas, and our very special guest, mayoral candidate, Anthony Adams. You like that, don't you?
I like, when we take the candidate part off, that's when I'll feel much better.
Well, when that part comes
Okay,
out,
so
you have to come back.
I'm sorry. So the first words were addressing homelessness and the housing issue.
Addressing
So I
stabilizing
guess at that point, what is step one to turn this thing around as far as you're concerned?
So step one is that we've got to take our affordable housing dollars and stop putting them into what they call these mixed finance developments. A lot of the projects that are being financed in downtown Detroit also have affordable housing dollars. We got to eliminate that immediately.
Where
We
they
have to
like
put
2 units.
Yeah,
low income.
20%, and it is AMI, and AMI is much higher countywide than it is in the city of Detroit. So we have to eliminate spending our dollars like that. We have to put those dollars into affordable housing fund. That's day one. That's a stroke of the pen executive action. Second stroke of the pen executive action is to stop transferring houses to the Wayne County Treasurer for tax foreclosure. That is a voluntary act that the city engages in. That's something that the city can stop immediately, and that will be done. The third thing is to change how we actually community police ourselves. We talk about community policing, but we've not made a commitment to spend the dollars and the resources necessary to be much more intentional in how we intervene and provide wraparound services for young people at risk. When you talk about the price of arresting and incarcerating people versus spending those dollars on social workers, psychologists, gang intervention specialists to provide job training services and skill educational enhancement for people, the imbalance is very clear. If we spend more dollars on the front end, we save ourselves fewer dollars on the back end for trying to incarcerate. Because remember, we tried mass incarceration, and we see what it got us. We got us a lot of black folks with felony records that we're now eliminating through this expungement process, which from my perspective really doesn't go quite far enough and where it needs to go. But these are a few things that can be done immediately. We also have to deal with the issue of sustainability of our community and the lack of an infrastructure plan that's laid out in the city of Detroit. Why are we not moving towards more green conservation and technology approaches to how we actually design and utilize our park system?
You're going to have to give me a high five on that one.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Now, and I am with you on that because this is the reality. When young people have nothing to do,
Right.
nowhere to go, what is there to do but to get in trouble? I mean, I was young once too. On the days when the park was closed because they were painting the slides and the swings, and our parents were at work, and you're at home from summer
Right.
school, somebody always comes up, let's throw rocks at that old house. Okay. If we were in the park on a slide, we would not be throwing rocks at that old house. If we had a wide community where we could go and our kids could basically play basketball, where they could go swimming, where they could learn
Actually be
computer
outside,
programming,
right.
Yeah,
where
I
they could
mean-
actually be outside, where they could play softball.
What is the lack of structure and recreation in the city of
Right.
Detroit? Now, I know POW does what it can do, but I was actually disappointed that there's been a separation, for example, between POW and a lot of the local youth football organizations. To me,
Right.
that relationship has got to be healed. We've got to have more structured recreational approach. Why are we not using some of our school facilities to provide? It was the structure of recreation that helped, because kids understood you come to the park, you got a rec leader, you take direction, you participate in team building sports, and we didn't have the level of violence that we had in our community because people had relationships.
Yes.
Part of our problem in our city is that our community is fractured, and we don't have a mayor who can speak to how you heal the fractures in the community. Whether it's working, for example, with at-risk men who are trying to become fathers again with their children. Navigating that relationship between a woman who has a baby with a man and her anger at him and his anger at her. How do we begin to heal that relationship so that it doesn't become a police run for domestic violence? These are the kind of issues that we need to be talking about, and there is no conversation because there is no connection with the community. And so I'm here to provide that leadership, because that is leadership. Leadership is taking difficult things and trying to come up with a solution. You might not reach a final solution, but every step in the way of healing relationships, of creating a structured relationships for our children to understand that you have to exist within the confines of an orderly society. There is a culture of lawlessness, of fast driving in our community that we've got to begin to break through and ask ourselves, why is this occurring? And these are systemic issues of structural racism, which has denied our young people the opportunity to have great educations because of 20 years of emergency management, because of over-policing and militarization of our department and mass incarceration. Now we're dealing with the effects of that, and we've got to begin to address these issues with a wide eye and clarity of call to action.
Now let me ask, there's some people that would say the decline of mental health facilities and that has increased homelessness in Detroit, which in turn has increased poverty.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? And if you do, how would you change that?
Well, clearly the elimination of mental health facilities during the England administration had a profound impact on the city of Detroit. because what you ended up doing is you ended up incarcerating people who had mental health issues when they should have been actually in treatment facilities. And so at any point in time, you might have 20 to 30% of the Wayne County jail population that really are mental issues and not criminal justice issues, because their quote criminal activity arises from the result that they have a mental infirmity that needs to be addressed. And so we have to understand that the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network actually gets $800 million to deal with mental health issues in the city of Detroit. And why are they not being held accountable to spend their money in a manner that recognizes that we have a severe issue in our community with mental health? We've also got to partner with our churches so that we can begin to break down the stigma of mental health in our community. We all got a cousin who got issues, but we've got to begin to address that and understand that a growing health menace in our society is suicide of young black men and young black women in our community. Having been a father of a child that committed suicide, understanding the devastating pain and impact of that, we've got to begin to understand how we move our children to wellness, how we provide them with the services, and get a good grip and handle on that, because we got to be passionate about what we do. And so when you talk about mental health issues and homelessness and connection, a lot of veterans are out there that are homeless. You see them at the intersections, at the freeways. How do we begin to send the advocates out there to help folk? But we also got to understand that there's some people that just simply like to be out there.
Right.
Now,
do we have a caller on the line?
No, I don't
Okay.
think we do.
Okay.
Now, one of the questions I have for you, because like I said, I have friends and family that still live in Detroit.
Right.
And they say something that I found often to be very true, and I still feel that way to this day. There are two Detroits.
Right.
There is downtown Detroit where whenever you turn on the cameras, anything happens in Detroit, it's there.
Yes.
And
The
then
good
there's
things.
every place else. When there's an issue, oh, look at this bad neighborhood. These people are in poverty, they got no money. It's lawlessness. They're all bad. How do you get those people who have lived in Detroit all their lives, because my family lived in Detroit also a long time ago. How do you get those people who have lived there and see all of this exponential growth, all of this money, all this beautiful walkway in downtown Detroit? And they're living in the outlying neighborhoods, way on the east side off of Hamburg and Gratiot, the opposite side of 7 Mile and Livernois, where they don't have all this great shopping, where they're in the middle of a food desert, where they can't get bus service, where they literally they can't find a decent grocery store.
Right.
They're only going to the party
store. I call
store.
them the forgotten districts.
Right.
Yeah, so how do we become Detroit?
How do you get
Right.
those people to look at you and say, you know what, he's going to change? Because every mayor that's run, I'm going to bring them into the fold. I'm going to go into those neighborhoods. And you know what? Those people are still waiting.
Yeah, well,
my family, they're still standing there. My great aunt's still sitting on the porch tapping her foot going,
Right.
when they coming? Because I'm sitting here watching. They haven't gotten here yet.
Well, I mean, and that relates to the whole philosophy of economic development in the city of Detroit. See, the philosophy, it actually started with Coleman, so we have to give him part of this, is that if you develop downtown, it's going to trickle out into the neighborhoods. Well, the only problem is that the money never gets out of downtown.
Right.
And when you got the tax abatements, the tax captures, the millions of dollars of revenue that could be freed up to put money in the communities stays in downtown Detroit. And so my approach is different. I'm saying let's focus on the little things. Let's focus on helping people stay in their homes. Let's focus on providing small businesses with opportunity to have credit so that we can not have food deserts in our community. It's a source of entrepreneurship that we can create in our own city with our own resources. Let's work on the small things, the housing stabilization, the neighborhood stabilization, creating small business entrepreneurship, employing people in the communities where they live. By
How about
using
just
that approach,
local community centers, because in every county in the state of Michigan, we have an aging boomer population.
Yeah.
We just do. And a lot of them have decided, you know what, I'm done driving. I'm done doing this, but I want to stay in my neighborhood.
Right.
There's nowhere for them to go. And they have information and knowledge and training they
well,
can
must
pass
have read
on
my
to these
platform.
younger children.
You
No.
read my
No,
platform.
no, this is just
because
the way I think.
I talked about
And it's like, where are those community centers where they can go? Like, my daughter did a food pantry out in Ypsilanti. We met a woman who my daughter talked to. She remembered when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Right.
She told my daughter how she was walking to the store, how she stopped, and she heard a radio blasting and it was saying this. She told her about the sights and sounds for like 15 minutes.
Right.
And my daughter said, and my daughter went to an all-girl Catholic school. She goes, Mom, I just learned more about the beginning of the U.S. involvement in World War II from this lady in 15 minutes. At the time she was in 10th grade. She goes, in my world history, in my U.S. history
we
class
know that
for 2 years.
we know that
So,
our
those are those
education
people.
system really doesn't teach
But I'm just
history.
saying,
They
those-
teach you what you want to
She's
know.
She's a valuable asset
but-
in that community
so-
where she can tell them what it
You're
was
gonna have to
like.
interrupt. Just go ahead and talk.
So
So
about
what
it.
we're
where are
talking
you on
about
that?
here, well, I've been clear. You actually look like you read my platform
No.
because I talk about intergenerational communication and how we get that going.
Right.
Because part of the reason in our community is that in the good old days, and I'm way older than both of you are, where you had a grandmother who lived in the house or uncle, auntie, people were connected and they had intergenerational contact. Now we don't have as much intergenerational contact. We have a lot of our seniors actually in senior buildings. And so what I advocated for is we need much more intergenerational communication. Our young people in high schools need to actually provide some service in our senior buildings so that we can create the kind of connection and the conversation between young and old, because what people will learn, what you learn is wisdom. My grandmother
Yes.
never got out of the
Yes.
8th grade, but you can tell me she wasn't the wisest woman in the world because she had mother wit that she was able to communicate and talk with me about things about life, and we miss a lot of that.
Right, absolutely. I remember even during high school where we would volunteer, have candy stripers,
Right.
be candy stripers and going into the senior
Right.
buildings and the hospitals,
Exactly.
talking to the elder. We don't do, there's a lot of things that are missing out of our Detroit
Well, my
public
daughter's
Because
schools.
there's
My
because
daughter's
the
school
How can we get
connection,
that?
the
Right.
connection is not there.
Right.
And
Right,
when you
they're
have
required to do community service out. She had to go. They came into Detroit
Right.
and they built homes.
Right.
They came in and they volunteered at food pantries or wherever
And so
they
we
were
need
needed.
that back.
And
It
some
needs to
schools
be-
are starting to require that. And I think it's a school in California where it's a small
Oh my God!
community.
You are watching Speaking Truth to Power on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and all top social media platforms. So thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. If you want to join the conversation, call us at 313-355-6018. And you are back with Speaking Truth to Power with Denise Kirchoff, Dr. Nakpangi Thomas, and our guest, mayoral candidate Anthony Adams.
And so what they're doing is the more time you volunteer in your
Right,
community,
right.
the more community service you get. They pay for classes at the
Right.
local community college. And
Right.
it's a city. It's not a really big city, but they found out they had an aging population and nobody was talking to them. They weren't getting out. And the kids were lacking something because their parents and even their grandparents are working all day. Everything they're learning from school or learning from the internet. So it was their way to marry the two. And they turn out that these kids went to the community college, took up things, and stayed right there.
Right.
And just started to become more involved. And they're creating this, I think they're on like their 4th or 5th year.
Right.
So they're creating their own population where people are interested in each other. People are helping each other. And they feel like, okay, now that they're out of school and they're still in school, in college, they're still volunteering.
But
They're not required anymore.
There's
but
a
now they're
benefit.
doing
There's
it.
a benefit to creating modes of communication between cross generations. Everybody benefits from that. Our older senior citizens benefit from it because it's stimulating their minds and it's giving them a purpose in life. Our young people benefit because it's providing them with the experience and understanding that there are a lot of things that you have to navigate through life in order to become an older or senior citizen. And so we've got, again, to be about, when I talked about healing the community, these are the kind of fractures that we need to heal. The disconnect between our young people and our old people. Disconnect between our people who live in neighborhoods and districts that have been forgotten versus the power structure in downtown. Understanding that we've got to do the little things great in order to heal our communities and provide the level of service that the people need in the neighborhoods. You won't see me really that concerned about downtown Detroit. I think they can take care of themselves. My focus, my commitment, my energy, my determination My vigor is all about how we make our neighborhoods work for everyone, that our seniors can age in place, that our children have recreational facilities where they have structure, that you have a police department that's responsive to the needs, that we have intervention specialists that go out and working in our neighborhoods. That's is where my resources and my energy will lie.
So, what do you think about using wind turbines and things of that nature to power as a power source?
I'm all about green conservation, green energy approaches, and if it works other places, then why can't we look at it here? You know, DTE does have some solar farms here in the city of Detroit. The wind turbine issue would be something I think we'd have to look at to figure out kind of where could that go, where could it be. I'm all for trying to create different modalities of providing energy in our community, especially if it's going to create jobs.
All right.
Now, where's the city on the issue of, okay, if you buy a house in the city and you turn solar, the city will give you a tax break on your home. Now, where does the city stand on that? And I'm not really sure. Is there a green energy board here in Detroit? Because, I mean, when you look at the automotive companies, everybody's going green.
Right.
It is going to happen.
Right.
You
we
know,
don't have
where,
any.
right.
But you know, they have an office of sustainability that talks about these things, but I don't know how aggressive they are. But there is no green credit that you can get for installing anything. The only green credit you can get in Detroit is for disconnecting your downspouts from the sewer system, and we see what that's getting us. You know, people's basements are flooding.
Flooding.
And the
water
thing is,
damage.
with the millennials coming in,
Right.
you know, the younger people coming in, and professionals like Dr. Thomas and stuff, that's what they're going to be looking for.
Right.
You know, that does have a lot to do with where you live. How green is it? How close is the hospital? How good are my city services?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes, and people don't want to think that, but that has a lot to do with where you live. And that's something that you have to offer because other cities are doing it.
Well, if you live in certain neighborhoods, your city services are better than others. I mean, that's the reality of what we face here. And so if you live in Palmer Woods and Green Acres and Sherwood Forest and Grandmont, your services tend to be pretty good. If you live in some other areas, you say Gratiot, Hamburg, Brightmoor, your services are not as good. And so we've got to begin to understand what neighborhoods need what services. All neighborhoods need some service.
So you're looking to change that.
We have to change the model of how service is delivered to make sure that the people who really need service get what they need. Everybody's entitled to police protection. Everybody's entitled to fire protection. Everybody's entitled to community services. But how do you enhance that in areas where you need to have it done?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, we have about 3 minutes left before our program is over. Is there anything that you would like to add or say that you haven't stated?
So this election is the most consequential election since Coleman Young was elected in 1972, 73. You're talking about changing the trajectory of a city that has neglected the majority of its population. The people who have been most impacted, who need to be impacted by policies, are being left behind, which is why we have an average income of $27,000, $28,000, why we have 160,000 people that are permanently opted out of the workforce, why we have more than 100,000 people that have lost their homes. If you're looking to change the trajectory of what goes on in the city of Detroit, if you're looking for someone who has the experience and the vision and the courage to tackle a power structure that wants to keep our city suppressed, I am the person that you should vote for. If you need to reach my website, I'm at Anthony Adams for Mayor, FORmayor.com. My Instagram is, Twitter is AA313Detroit. My email is AA4mayor@gmail.com. I respond to all questions, concerns, and comments. I've spoken to 1 people, I've spoken to 500. I am not going to lose this by not being engaged and involved in the people.
Yeah, you're at car washes, barber shops.
That's
I've
right.
seen you on the streets walking
Come
all
on.
over.
That's right.
From downtown to the east side,
Hey,
all the way to the west side.
Very little
all
time
in one
downtown.
day.
Although I did go to Hot Sam's, had the 100-year anniversary. I had to go to that because it was all about black entrepreneurship. But I spend very little downtown. I'm out in the neighborhoods. I'm in the community.
Well, that's good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Speaking Truth to Power with Denise Kirchoff, Dr. Nakpangi Taylor.
I'm
and
Dr. Nakpangi Thomas.
I'm sorry.
Me and Denise, we're going to fight.
We're gonna
and
fight
it's
over
not
that.
going to be an assault because she gives me permission, you all. So
Yes, you have my permission. I am sorry. I am sorry. And we are talking with soon to be maybe mayor of Detroit.
All right. That sounds good to me. You have to speak truth. You have to speak truth into power and power into existence.
Now,
Right.
somebody wants to donate to your campaign. How can
Yeah.
they do that?
They can go once again, to go to Anthony Adams for Mayor, FORmayor.com. My website, it has an easy link to my website. We understand that these races are not inexpensive. They're very costly. I'm personally invested. I'm pushing all my chips into the middle of the table because there is a pathway to victory. Don't listen to the pundits. Don't listen to the paid operatives. There is a pathway to victory. There is a high level of dissatisfaction with the leadership in this city.
And right now, we actually offer Mayor Mike Duggan a chance to come on to our show and actually respond to what you have just said.
He won't
And
respond.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Speak the Truth to Power. Catch us next Saturday at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Everybody have a great weekend. Are we still on, Roger?
No, I think we're clear.
Roger?